What is up, y'all? It's your boy Aniki coming at you with another video, coming at you with the My Hero Academia 331 review. As you already know, I like to get straight into it, so if you ain't read the chapter, what are you doing here? You gotta go right now. Please leave. Alright, for the rest of you, stay, listen, enjoy. Now, My Hero 331, United States of America. I think it's interesting that Horikoshi is making it a point to emphasize that this is a U.S. versus Japanese person conflict. This is someone coming over. The upside to this is that I did a little research, looked into it, and this should be happening within the scope of international waters, which technically means that this isn't happening on Japanese territory. Obviously, the international waters laws could have changed in the scope of My Hero Academia's years, but for all intents and purposes, for what we have to go off of, this is technically an international waters incident, not within the jurisdiction of Japan, but rather just effectively Shigaraki operating as a guardian to Japan. And as we've been consistently having this narrative emphasis on propaganda before the fight started back in 329, we definitely need to consider what the political angles are going to be moving forward, as even whether or not Star and Stripes showed up was partially a discussion about clearance and legislation, and how Salam and Big Red Dot both wanted to appear. So if we're sticking with true to the story, then this being in international waters is likely going to have some weight to it. It'll allow the destruction to not happen within the scope of Japan. It'll mean that, you know, while Shigaraki will have caused massive explosions and all these other things, he will not be damaging the actual nation. This allows for them to kind of really spin this narrative the further you go into the chapter. But we finally get confirmation that Shigaraki, the rule doesn't work because he doesn't have a defined sense of self yet due to the merger with him and All For One. There's not one set identity, so Tomura Shigaraki isn't exactly a functional name. Furthermore, he could be referred to as Shimura. I like the balancing of three identities because we've talked about this before in the Unholy Trinity video with the, you know, this idea of 3 in 1, a deific figure. We started this chapter, or this storyline, with the whole imbuing them with divinity thing. Horikoshi is consistently playing with these themes. So yeah, something similar to like the Christian symbolism being imbued into Shigaraki, while conflicting with someone who eventually uses Greek mythology later, but we'll get into that. So we get more of an explanation on Star and Stripes' quirk for New Order, just that, you know, has higher liberties with things that are inanimate, things that don't have a sense of self, but rather if you do have a sense of self, then her identification of you needs to line up with that for her to put rules on you and restrict you. Furthermore, the amount of modification she can make to organisms and living things is slightly lower than what it is for what she can do with inanimate objects. Still allows her to be pretty powerful, but it, you know, there's a limit at least. Furthermore, we get that we're maintaining consistency because Star and Stripes spends a lot of time squinting. A lot of that has to do with the fact that she canonically wears glasses. Now, she tells them to send word to Commander Akbar, and we once again get that art style shift into the Western comic style, where, you know, you even get the little stars into the speech bubbles and all that other good stuff. And we get that flashback to, you know, confirming that she's always been, like, she's been buff, she's actually working out, she's actually truly fit, and that this team and her have been riding together for a really good time. So at this point, they've just been in it, going through it, every mission, every way. It's whatever they're gonna do it together. They're riding out, and you can see it when they say Wedge tells him to, or when Wedge gets told to shake that raggedy lowlife off the top side because that's Star's perch. And Shigaraki quickly gets, you know, onto the Nomu again. Now, we get to see one of the higher forms and utilizations of her power, and one of the reasons why New Order reigns supreme. We get fist bump to the earth, or when she creates a figure that is 1,000 times her size. And it's worth noting that specifically in this context, Star and Stripe looks to be about 6 feet tall. So at the very least, this figure is more than likely a mile tall, at least a mile high. That's about 2-3 kilometers into the air. So we got a 2-3 kilometer size figure punching Shigaraki this chapter. And we get confirmation that while she's manipulating the air for Shigaraki, it is invisible. I like them making it a point to emphasize that because it can sometimes be confusing. We obviously get to see her shape so we can see what she's doing, but even then there's like light lining to make sure that we understand it's supposed to be transparent. You can't see it, but it's functionally allowing her to have a JoJo stand for all intents and purposes. And she decides that it's not really worth it to do damage to him, but it's definitely worth noting that the brunt force being able to cause such a dispersal of clouds is highlighting just how much kinetic energy she's actually being able to toss on top of him with this. These are honestly, genuinely Texas Smash level attacks, possibly higher. I don't know for sure, but because we're not in the same type of environment. But this is definitely reminiscent of some of the smashes that Deku was hitting Shigaraki with during the war arc in her attempt to bust him down to atoms. Now, when she tells them to give her a touch of those lasers, the lasers have already been identified, and you can tell that they aimed all the lasers towards her body specifically, and then she grabs it with the avatar by telling them to combine into one. So she still ends up taking some of the damage from those lasers. So these scuff marks, when she creates the second rule, aren't just because, oh, her transformation was allowing her to hide some of the damage she took. She was genuinely affected by the lasers, but as she was getting hit with them, she was able to like force them to combine into one and then pull it up, making herself a lightsaber, which I appreciate. But so that's just the first Star Wars reference, which is shout out to Hexamendel for making this laser blue for this part. And then we get Kuranos. And now, as I mentioned at the beginning, Shigaraki has a lot of symbolism, from the stigmata that we've talked about in previous chapters, and to the need for being a salvation, to the crucifixion pose as he was walking into All For One to accept the quirk. And so we've had a lot of Christian symbolism, and now we have a great reference to Zeus, considered one of the more cruel gods in mythology, who was smiting, coming down just like he would with the spear of lightning. That's even what Kuranos means. It means lightning. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm sorry if anybody Greek is offended by my failure to pronounce it right. That's not what I'm trying to do to you. And they get excited because they're like, oh, non-stop blast of a max laser? Yeah, that should burn him away to nothing. And she kind of gives credit to Endeavor, saying that if you could just toast Shigaraki away, then more than likely Endeavor would have been able to put him in a pack and we would have been done with it. But we had got her mentioning she was going to use a special privilege, and now we know what that is. She effectively calls in a strike, but we get to meet Commander Akbar. Now, Commander Akbar seems to be based off of Akbar from Star Wars, aka Mr. It's a Trap. And furthermore, the letterer makes it a point so that every first letter to the speech bubbles leads into the phrase "it's a trap." If you take the first letter of each of his speech bubbles, it spells out "it's a trap." I want to emphasize that this is not something that the translator did. It is something that the letterer did. It's one of those more quiet roles within the world of manga and comics. There are, there's people who draw, there's people who color, there's people who do the lettering, there's people for the typesetting and selecting of fonts and all that other stuff. So just shout out to, the letterer's name is usually included too. So shout out to John Hunt for managing to structure his speech bubbles so that it actually ends up saying it's a trap if you take the first letter of each word. Whether or not that's actually going to play into the story or not, we do not know. But the fact that we do get a name for the missile so that Cassie can hopefully surpass All Might. Now, some people are considering that Akbar saying that her behavior makes the nation shine brighter as something that is Horikoshi saying that this was a good thing and it's approved in the story. Not necessarily. You're kind of missing the fact that all generals, most of the time, the military is going to have a pro-military view. So would it make sense for the commander to be like, you doing this thing to risk your life to save millions and possibly billions of people is going to make the United States of America look bad, because in their minds the end is going to justify these means? So take your foot off the gas with that one. That's a weird take, especially when most generals, especially as characters in series, aren't going to randomly be like, damn dog, you shouldn't have ran away to go handle that business. I'm upset. Like, no, that's just not how these characters are written. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense with what it usually takes from a mind state to get to these higher positions in the military. You kind of need to be the guy who's going to feel like the military is always justified doing their strikes, and oftentimes you're going to want to do stuff before you're approved anyway. So that's more reflective of what military commanders and people who end up in high positions in the military think than necessarily what the author thinks, at least based off these couple lines of dialogue. That's kind of where your brain should be, not trying to spin some weird narrative about the author. And with the missiles being named Tiamat, I don't know if that is intentionally a reference to barrage or not, but it is a barrage of missiles and that are named Tiamat. So I just want to point out that Tiamat in the manga Barrage, also written by Horikoshi, was a very strict teacher that a lot of the basis for Shota Aizawa is in, aka Eraserhead. I don't know why I didn't just lead with that one instead. And so he was kind of a harsh and like strict teacher. So what we could have this be is effectively these missiles arriving are going to be some kind of important lesson or some kind of harsh lesson for either the reader or the people within the verse of My Hero Academia. Whether that lesson is Shigaraki is untouchable and we currently do not have the means to take him down, or that lesson is, you know, sheer destructive force isn't going to be the answer. Whatever the case may be, there is likely to have some massive amount of information attached to this that's going to change our perspective on these situations. We do get confirmation that Cassie at least got to meet All Might once, and that's about all I'm going to have to say about this chapter. Pretty action heavy. I'm kind of expecting for the next chapter to have, like, Tiamat is probably going to be on screen at the end of the chapter, so that gives Shigaraki some time to actually decide to get involved in the fight if he wants to, because whether you've noticed or not, he only attacked once with the air cannon and heavy payload, and from then he's kind of just been baiting. Like, obviously he dove in, but he was also partially baiting so that he could try to steal Star and Stripe's quirk. So we gotta see what's going on with that. This could just be a fight where he gets meat dolled for a while, and then because he's, you know, doing that gamer figure out the abilities thing. But it could also just be that once he starts fighting, she's gonna start losing. It could end up being that when these missiles land, they both take immense amounts of damage. She loses her whole flight team. Star washes up on shore somewhere, and Shigaraki also washes up on shore, and the Nobu's gone, and that fight technically ends in a stalemate. She's supposed to make sure that every Tiamat hits their mark. ICBMs are typically nuclear payloads. The fact that they're not actually on Japanese soil technically means that dropping a bunch of nukes isn't an attack on Japan itself. However, the fact that they were willing to aim the nukes at a Japanese citizen still leaves them room to wiggle with the political narrative and paint Shigaraki as not only a liberator of Japan, but also its new defender. So let me know what you guys are thinking about these chapters, whether it's the politics or the action. Excited to hear. We'll be back next Sunday with the Church of MHA. That's all I really gotta say. Dropped a One Piece video for chapter 1030. Thinking about adding One Piece to the channel permanently, and I might start back doing JJK reviews. So if you're interested in that and you made it to this point of the video, make sure you leave a comment giving your opinion on whether or not you want to see more One Piece, more Jujutsu Kaisen. If you want me to start covering Undead Unluck or Mashle, just let me know. If you want me to start talking more about manga that's out there, maybe do a video on Dan 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 and finally read that, let me know. What do you want from this channel? I'm Aniki, and I'm out.